Chapter 1 of Destination Unknown. When Rabbi Yitzchak asked me to come along with him on a mission, I could hardly believe my ears. I was only 12 years old, and I was definitely not the most diligent student in the yeshiva of the small town outside of Yerushalayim where I lived. Besides, Rabbi Yitzchak was one of the greatest chachamim of the time. He'd written many well-known sforim on all areas of Torah, including the hidden parts. Rabbi Yitzchak had gone on several missions to oversee collection of funds for the communities of Eretz Yisrael. He'd recently returned from one of these journeys, so it was a little strange that he was going on another so soon. But who was I to ask questions? If Rabbi Yitzchak decided to go on another mission, that was his business, not mine. But when he asked me, Avram Shimon, to come along with him, that was my business. I can still remember our conversation. Avram, how are things going with you? Well, I'm worried about my father, Rabbi. Rabbi Yitzchak knew my story. I can understand that, Avram, he said. And how is your mother holding up? She acts bravely to encourage my sister and me, but inside I'm sure she's as worried as I am. Rabbi Yitzchak was silent for a moment. Avram, he finally said, I will be leaving Eretz Yisrael again shortly on another journey. I didn't know why Rabbi Yitzchak felt it necessary to tell me this, and I wasn't sure what to say. I want you to accompany me, Avram. Me? I replied. Yes, Avram, you. Well, Rabbi understands that with my father away, it might not be the best time. I understand, and nevertheless, I want you to accompany me. I have to ask my mother. Far enough, Avram, bring your answer and tell me as soon as you can. I wondered why Rabbi Yitzchak was asking me rather than my mother, but then again, Rabbi Yitzchak had his ways. Although I was thrilled that Rabbi Yitzchak had asked me to come along, I didn't feel like I could go. How could I leave my mother and sister on their own? My father, Reb Daniel, a great Talmid Chacham and disciple of the Revered Mikubal, Reb Shimon Zaharo Livkacha, and one of the long line of Rabbanim, had disappeared nearly a month ago. Either he'd left for some reason, or who knew what happened to him. I felt awful when I wondered what had become of my father. I sometimes lay awake at night thinking about him. I even cried myself to sleep, although of course I never admitted it. So when I told my mother about Rabbi Yitzchak's request and she insisted that I go, I was vaporized. But I can't leave you and Sipora and Sarah alone, I persuade. You are not leaving us alone. Remember what Abba teaches us about Hashem being so close, and how he has his messengers here in town who will look out for us. I could barely contain my excitement when I told Rabbi Yitzchak that my mother had agreed to the trip. I didn't seem very surprised. You'd better get ready, Avram. We'll be leaving soon. Yes, Rabbi, I will. As I made preparations for the trip, I was busy thinking. I was excited to be going, as anybody my age would be. Who wouldn't want the adventure? This would be even more exciting than the summer I had spent at Uncle Gavriel's farm in the north. But deep down in my heart, I also had another reason for wanting to go. Perhaps I would find my father. Maybe while on the streets of some strange foreign city, I would spot him. I would run over to him and he would explain why he'd been and why he'd gone away. I didn't mention this to a soul. It was my secret. It was a far-fetched hope, but hope can be as far-fetched as you want it to be, can't it? My mother insisted that I buy a new robe for the journey. You'll be visiting new places and seeing important people, she told me. So what, Ima? So you must be properly dressed. Why? Because you ris- represent Eretz Israel. That's why. My mother's tone left no room for argument. So with mixed emotions, I took the precious coin she gave me. On one hand, it would be nice to get a new robe for traveling, but on the other hand, I was taking her money that was not easy for her to get. When I went to buy the robe, something upsetting happened. The man who sold robes was generally a fine person, but sometimes people can be insensitive. As he was fitting me, he asked, "Do you think this is the right time to be going on a trip?" I said nothing. I mean, with your father gone and all that. I knew what he meant. I didn't have explained himself. "Don't you think your mother might need you?" I continued to keep quiet. Didn't people think? Didn't he realize that I had thought of that? Did he, did he think my mother didn't know that it was best for her and her sister? Didn't he trust Rabbi Yitzchak's judgment? I felt bad, but I kept quiet. My mother was very happy with the new robe I had purchased. "You look very handsome," she exclaimed. I shrugged. "Your father would be proud," she said, as her eyes became teary. I didn't know what to say. Then she corrected herself. "Your father will be proud." I fought with myself. Should I disclose my hidden secret? I scratched hope. Finally, I just couldn't hold back. "Emma, maybe I'll find Abba," I blurted out. She looked at me hard. "Maybe you will," she said. Aside from being a housewife, my mother had little business. Thoughtfully, it was more than a business. It was a beloved homebelly. Actually, to her, it wasn't a avodah, a gift from Hashem. My mother is a very talented artist, and she spends her spare time making small wooden paintings of objects on Kedusha like Sefer Torah, Tefillin, and the shul. It provided her with some extra income, but it meant much more to her than that. After I showed her the robe, she went to the metal case where she kept her paintings. She reached and pulled out one that I have never seen before. It was a painting the size of my hand, depicting the Holy Mikdash. I'm no art expert, but I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. It looked so real. "Here, Avram, take it," my mother said, handing it to me. "Why, Emma? You don't want it?" "I do, Emma, but why are you giving it to me?" "I wanted you to have it for whenever you need it." "Why now, Emma?" "So you'll have it whenever you need it." As with the robe, she said, it is a way that left me no room to argue. I took it. "That's very nice, Emma. I'll always treasure it." "You'll do with it as you see fit," she said, and turned away. I knew she was about to cry, and to be honest, so was I. The day before we left, I met a good, maybe the best friend, Moshe. "So I hear you're leaving soon," he remarked. Maybe Yitzchak had told me to keep that excited day out of our disport a secret, but appreciatively, Moshe had heard that I was coming up. "Yes, Rabbi Yitzchak is keeping this trip quiet, but leave it with your good friend Moshe to find out about it." He smiled. "Well, I'm really glad for you." I knew he meant it. He must have been terribly disappointed that he wasn't chosen to go, but he was sincerely happy for me. Then he said something that no one else had said. It might have been offend, but when Moshe said it, it didn't bother me. Maybe that's because I knew he meant it. I think that in your heart, Avram, you hope to be able to find your father on this journey. I hope you do. I said nothing. I didn't want my voice to betray my emotions. Then Moshe took out a small cloth packed from his robe. He handed it to me. What is this? I asked. It is for your trip. You never know when it might come in handy. I opened it and saw a little knife Moshe always carried with him. No, I can't take it. Please, Avram, I want you to have it for the trip. Who knows, you might need it to cut berries off a tree somewhere. I laughed. I thought this comment was funny, but somewhere deep inside of me, I felt faint feeling of dread. I wondered when I might really need the knife for. Where would there be danger on this journey? Fiercely, I told myself to stop thinking that way. Why was I always so nervous? If Moshe noticed the inner conversation I was having with myself, he didn't say anything. You can give it back to me when you return, was all he said. I really appreciated this, Moshe. It's nothing, he said, waving his hand. Moshe is a true friend. I knew that I would miss him, as well as everyone else in our town. Sichem Laolam, Avram, he said, and we shook hands, and I went on my way. Chapter 2 will be the next video.